Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. The Tories and Labour have wrecked the public finances. Reform UK will restore them. For decades now, the Tories and Labour have suffocated the British economy, wasted billions of pounds every year prioritising foreign citizens, giving us the most expensive energy costs in the world, and raising tax as a percentage of GDP in this country to the highest levels since World War II. Let's talk about the Tory record. They claim to be the party of fiscal responsibility, the ones who help us live within our means. They managed to run a deficit in every single one of their 14 years in power. They managed to triple the national debt and make everyone miserable in the process. And they blew up people's mortgages for good measure. Labour are just as bad. According to Capital Economics, Rachel Reeves is raising taxes on British people, post the budget that's coming, at a faster rate than any Chancellor in 55 years. Unemployment in this country is already at a 4-year high and trending higher, and that's to say nothing of the millions who are not in that number because they're not actively seeking work. And inflation remains sticky at 3.8%, well above the target rate for the Bank of England, which is why so many in this country are struggling with the cost of living. The cost of living is intolerable. The prices in the supermarket seem to go up seemingly on a weekly basis. We have rents going up all the time. Mortgages never seem to get any cheaper, and don't even get us started on energy bills, which people are petrified to even open. And speaking of energy, this country has the highest industrial energy costs in the world. There is not an example on the planet of a high-growth economy with the kind of energy prices Britain has, nor have there ever been, nor will there ever be. So, the political class are running this country's economy off a cliff. Britain is headed for economic catastrophe unless we urgently change course. And that's not just me or Nigel saying that. The warning lights in terms of sovereign debt are already sounding and are already flashing, and the alarms are sounding. The 30-year borrowing costs for the United Kingdom in terms of gilts are already not far off multi-decade highs. And seemingly every week we hear of another global multinational that is pulling investments from the UK. As Prime Minister, Nigel Farage will restore the public finances and restore and revive confidence in the United Kingdom. You know, despite the best efforts of the political class, we still have an awful lot going for us in this country. 3 of the top 10 universities on the planet are here on these little islands. We have more than our fair share of brilliant people in this new era. We also have millions upon millions of strivers and grafters, men and women who set their alarm clocks before they go to bed and rise early in the morning to go to work. And I promise you this, as Prime Minister, Nigel Farage will be their champion. So, without further ado, please let me introduce you to the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Zia, thank you, and good morning, everybody. Another depressing budget hoves into view, another tax-raising budget, another budget that doesn't have the courage, the guts to cut public spending, and I think the level of pessimism amongst businesses, amongst savers, amongst those that have assets of any kind has not been lower in modern times. I think for some years we've actually been living under an illusion we've not been prepared to face up to just how much of an economic mess we're genuinely in. As we slip down the global league tables, we kid ourselves. Well, it's okay. We've got GDP growth. But there wouldn't have been any GDP growth over the course of the last few years if it wasn't for mass migration on a scale hitherto never even contemplated, and of course, excess government borrowing. That is all that has kept GDP figures up. And indeed, I think we can argue very strongly that on an individual basis, mass migration has made the average Briton poorer. You take a year like 2024, a record level of people coming into the country, and GDP per capita falling. And of course, the productivity problem, well, there's nothing new there. We've been suffering from poor productivity going back for the best part of 20 years. We convinced ourselves that by importing masses of cheap, unskilled foreign labor, that somehow that would be good for our economy. Well, it was good for the wage bills of big companies in the short term, but catastrophic when it came to training and education for our own workforce. And when it comes to the public sector, who still seem to be hooked on the idea that working from home somehow is good for productivity, well, we see the disastrous results, and this is something that Danny Kruger, on our behalf, has started work on already. But the one subject we really don't discuss, at least the Conservative and Labour parties don't discuss, is the level of national debt. In fact, even last week, the leader of the Conservative Party was saying, in office, we cut the deficit for 14 years. Well, cutting the deficit is a very different thing to cutting debt when you're still running borrowing in certainly at peacetime levels, unlike anything ever seen before. They may try to wash their hands and run away from it, but our national debt increased by over 2.5 times during those 14 years. And now it's accelerating. Now it's accelerating in the most extraordinary way. The OBR predictions for the year going back just before the general election was that we'd borrow 77 billion in the year. That estimate is now 130 billion and rising with each and every month. Our debt has risen faster than any other comparable Western country. In fact, in the last 20 years, our debt-GDP ratio is up by nearly 60%. We are doing worse on debt than any of our competitors, and that includes Eurozone countries who are in other deep, deep trouble.